Yes, I believe so.
All right, great. Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all safe and healthy. On behalf of Legacy, I would like to welcome you all to the webinar on the game-changing CSR Amendment of 2021. Before we begin, there are certain points which we need to go over. Um, all the audience members are requested to be on mute, except for our speakers. We strongly advise you not to open any links in the chat box. We will be spending the last 15 to 20 minutes in a Q&A session with the panelists. So we request the audience members to kindly post their questions in the Q&A box only and not in the chat box. This webinar is going to be recorded and will be made available on the Legacy YouTube channel. We would also like to inform everyone that this webinar is for a general awareness of the legal implications and developments with respect to the CSR amendment and does not constitute legal advice or opinion. The audience is advised to seek a formal legal opinion before taking any decisions. The objective of this webinar is to take an eagle eye view and deal with some of the critical issues which have been identified in light of the recent amendments in the CSR regime. The views and opinions expressed in this webinar are personal views of the speakers and do not represent the organization in any manner whatsoever. Now that that has been taken care of, I would like to commence this session by introducing our esteemed panel. Joining us today as our first panelist is Professor Anil Gupta. Professor Anil Gupta is an Indian scholar and activist for the cause of creative communities and individuals at the grassroots. Professor Gupta is the founder of the Honeybee Network, Shrishti, NIF, and GIAN, and is a CSIR Bhatnagar Fellow. He was awarded the Padma Shri in the year 2004 for his contributions to management education and was a member of the Advisory Board for Global Innovation Center, UNICEF. He was also a member of the High Level Committee on CSR in 2018 and has authored the internationally acclaimed book, Grassroots Innovation: Minds on the Margin Are Not Marginal Minds. Through his 36-year long stint as a full-time professor at IIM Ahmedabad, he was able to make a phenomenal impact in the corporate sector, as almost all the top CEOs in this country were his students at some point in time. We are honored to have you here with us, sir. Our second panelist is Mr. Govindraj Etiraj. Mr. Etiraj is a television and print journalist who has reported and written on the Indian business for over 25 years. He is the founder of India Spend, an agency that dispenses critical data information to global philanthropic organizations that enable them to make strategies on impactful spending. He has also launched a fact-checking initiative called factchecker.in and healthcheck.in, a one-of-its-kind resource on public health reporting in India. He is the former founder editor-in-chief of Bloomberg TV India and has also worked on the Aadhaar project. Most recently, he founded Boom, an independent journalism initiative that fights misinformation and explains issues with the larger objective of making the internet safer. Both Boom and FactChecker were India's first verified members of the International Fact-Checking Network and affiliated with Pointer Institute. India Spend is a member of the Global Investigative Journalism Network. Mr. Govindraj was named a 2018 McNulty Prize laureate in recognition for his leadership with Boom, India Spend, and FactChecker. He is a fellow of the inaugural class of Ananta Aspen's India Leadership Initiative and the Aspen Global Leadership Network, and winner of the 2014 BMW Responsible Leaders Award. Thank you for joining us, sir. Our next panelist is Professor G. Ravindran. A hardcore industry veteran for over 40 years, Professor Ravi now wears many hats. He is the director of the Goodness Project, chair professor of leadership development at TIS, the founder of Parrot Digital Solutions Singapore, and advisor for Evolution Sports. He is a former global leader of Society for Human Resource Management and has helped enhance the HR professionals' ethics quotient through this platform, and has also won acclaim from Time magazine for creating golden companies for the future. Also the author of Re-Enterprise, Professor Ravi has seminal works like Industrial Agriculture, Export Labor, Catch the Eye of Innovation to his credit. We welcome you, sir. Our fourth panelist is Ms. Shabnam Siddiqui. Shabnam Siddiqui is the Director for Center of Excellence for Governance, Ethics and Transparency at the United Nations Global Compact Network India and has played a pivotal role in sustainable development goals and climate change. An academic practitioner with 23 years of experience, Shabnam specializes in developing and executing strategic intervention through multi stakeholder networks, is skilled at training and research, and has several national and international publications to her credit. Shabnam has a master's in sociology from India, a second master's in international peace studies from the USA, and has embarked on a PhD in public policy at Singapore. Her recent foray was as a Chevening Rolls Royce Innovation, Science, Policy, and Leadership Fellow at said business school, St. Cross College, University of Oxford. She has had short term and long term stints in Pakistan, Italy, France, United States, and Singapore. Thank you for joining us today, ma'am. I now hand over the platform to Mr. Suhas Tuljapurkar, the founder director of Legacy Services and the managing partner of Legacy Partners, who will be moderating this session.
Thank you very much, Risha. Thanks to everybody. Thanks to all the panel members and very good evening. It's an interesting Friday evening, and despite of it being Friday evening, we've seen more than 250 participants in this webinar. Thanks a lot for that phenomenal support. It talks a great deal about the subject and about the curiosity with respect to which everybody would want to contribute to the corporate social responsibility and make the difference in India. What we are going to do today is I'll just briefly set the tone of and try and understand what are these new amendments and why we want to qualify them as game changer in this space, because it started off in under Companies Act 2013. From 2014 and onwards we have seen a journey which has had its own impact. India is the only country probably which has mandated and is the, it, and the rules now lend credence to the fact that this is a statutory obligation of every company in India that has some allocable surplus to be devoted to the society. We'll come back to what the thresholds are, but that's more of a semantics there. But realize the rules have now specifically talked about CSR being statutory obligation of the companies who are otherwise liable for making sure that CSR spend is done. There is a change in CSR policy and the manner in which CSR policy and what the contents of the policies ought to be. Uh, we will come back to that later on. But CSR policy includes annual action plan now mandatorily required there. There were certain challenges in CSR implementation. I think the act and the rules initially said that you got to implement the CSR activities through third parties such as not-for-profit entities under Section 8 or trusts or societies. And there was a clarification. We have seen, especially in the under the Companies Act, you see the statutory provisions have been diluted or overridden by rules. Rules have been overridden by circulars. So, as a typical lawyer, when I look at delegated legislation, I get amazed with the manner in which this entire space has been developed under the Companies Act. But notwithstanding the delegated legislation, we had circulars coming from MCA that talked about that company can itself conduct the CSR activities. However, that credence has been given now because there is a specific provision there under the rules that company itself can undertake the activities. Thank you very much, sir, because Professor Gupta was one of the panel members on the high level committee that recommended these changes. We couldn't have got a better person today amongst us. Thank you very much, sir. Okay, now there is another kind of a thing that has come up, which is two companies can actually jointly establish NGO, and that established NGO together by two companies can be the implementing agency for the purposes of CSR activities. So overall, there is increased flexibility with respect to CSR implementation that has happened. At the same time, the oversight has increased from the government perspective. So there is a CSR registration that is mandatorily required for almost every project, every entity. Either the company can register it or the implementing agency can register it. So, as we said, I think international agency can now be appointed for designing, monitoring, and evaluating your CSR objectives and activities. And there was a challenge with respect to fund utilization. And I think the new rules saddle that responsibility and liability onto the CFO of the company, CFO or the person who is in charge of the funds treasury and carries the CFO function in the company. So there is a personal liability to that effect that's getting fastened now. Therefore, all those misgivings which were there with respect to the the aberrations that happened on the objective part of CSR will now probably get curtailed. CSR expenditure, administrative overheads are permitted only up to 5%. What goes in there, what does not go in there has been now specified very clearly. There is a much more clarity that has come up. CSR amount which is unspent, there is a separate bank account in which you need to put that. You can use that in next 3 years, and you can actually use the CSR funds for acquisition of capital asset. There was some ambiguity earlier, but that's now become very clear. CSR reporting in terms of annual accounts and financial statement reporting has come up. There are website disclosures that have come up. I'm just kind of capturing some highlights. Impact assessment with respect to any spend which is about 10 crores. I think it's now mandated, and we believe this will be a game changer, because I think impact assessment with respect to CSR, once I think the companies start reporting this as the part of their independent obligation through independent agency monitored, and uh, you can earmark up to 50 lakhs or 5% of expenditure for just conducting the impact assessment when your spend is over 10 crores. Uh, I think these are broad highlights. What we are looking at it is that this space has undergone a lot of amendments. There have been amendments, there have been clarifications, there have been notifications. Section has been amended, schedule has been amended, rules have been amended quite often, and umpteen clarifications have come. So this was, in a way, a moving challenge for a compliance professional. So what we have done at Legasis, we have created a dedicated uh, electronic, or let's say digital persona here called CSR Angel. Don't look at CSR as a compliance atom. We will help you comply with it. It's not difficult to comply with it. Even if you have to redraft your CSR policy, please reach out to us. We'll probably have the best benchmarks in India on CSR policies. And we are saying we're not going to charge you for this, at least till the March end. We intend not to charge a single rupee for supporting the CSR activities and compliances of the companies. So we will have policy builders automated on the platform. We will create repository of best practices. We already have some practices that have come up. We will look at regulatory notifications and connecting with you. This is going to be Legacy CSR Angel for all of you. And mind you, we're not going to charge. So let's now discuss what is the future, because I think we've traveled the journey from 2014 onwards. 6 years have gone by. We've had some challenging situations, or more particularly defining events such as COVID-19. In the backdrop of that, SDGs have come to the forefront, and I'm going to now open the floor for discussions. I'm going to request Shabnam, not because it's lady first, that's the reason, but more importantly, the SDG seems to have been focused, a high level committee in which Professor Gupta was a member, plus the government's intent seems to be how do you, the high level committee report actually maps SDG across to CSR. So I'm going to start off with you in terms of your initial comments and everybody's initial comments, and then look at few of the critical issues as we discuss forward. Thank you very much once again to everyone. Shabnam, over to you.
Thank you, Suhas, for putting me on the spot right away. Good evening, everyone. I think it's very interesting, the kind of evolution that is happening in the CSR domain. As we all know, as Suhas also mentioned, that India is, I think, the only country that makes CSR mandatory, like the kind of rules and regulations that we have. Everywhere else, when we talk about the corporate social responsibility, it is kind of already linked to their sustainable development agenda. And more so post 2015, when the sustainable development goals came into operation and they are being implemented by 193 countries around the world. Now, essentially, the bottom line behind all these rules, regulations, the frameworks that have come up is how can businesses give back? And doing good and giving back was considered the forte of a few companies earlier, mostly in through philanthropic institutions of their own or some institutions that they supported. But seeing the kind of challenges that countries like India are facing, how can there be a more organized approach to the social agenda, and how do corporates can contribute to social development, is what essentially this discussion is all about. And within this domain, I think while we as a global compact interact with companies, we have realized that like many companies, even before any voluntary guidelines also came into practice, were already spending more than 2% of their profits for developmental activities. Now I think it's much more regulated in the sense that you know where to like what constitutes CSR, what will fall out of the purview, what can be like later discussed, and that will be the forte, I think, of other speakers on this panelist. What we essentially think two good things about this new amendments is the very fact. So we are looking at it in the positive sense that a lot of we realized within our companies that there was sometimes tension on the spending of CSR, but now with a kind of decriminalization kicking in with the amendments, it's much more uh, the space for innovation in terms of support has increased. But I think for us as an institution, what's most important is the focus on impact. And the focus on impact is important because we have seen businesses that might invest much more quantum of money. So the quantum is high, but the impact is very low. And that's because many a times the kind of structured, so some groups I know have professionals working on their CSR implementation. So there is a need assessment, there is a proper set of monitoring and evaluation, there is impact evaluation, and that cycle continues. But many a times for some other companies, it's more like a checkbox. So how do you spend money? This is the deadline, this is the amount of money to be spent. And we have seen that quite a few of these businesses between January and March of the financial year will end up saying that this is we just need to get rid of all this money. So those kind of things, I think the amendment will stop at. And SDGs become much more crucial because the Sustainable Development Goals are a framework. It's an agenda for change, and an agenda that has been developed over 5 years of consultation amongst all countries. So it's not only in earlier times the developed world telling the developing world what to do, what not to do, how to go about things, but all of us were part of the consultations. We realize which are the SDGs that we find crucial, we want to take impact in. And the implementation, so financing of the SDGs is one of the challenges that most countries are grappling with. So maybe kind of seeing linkages. There will not be complete overlaps between CSR and SDG because they are two unique agendas also. But where can the overlap happen? How can the CSR funding and the CSR really help you develop a niche in putting your SDG forward? The Sustainable Development Goals is crucial. And secondly, I think for us as a global compact, what's most important is when we speak to businesses, we realize that there's a lot of passion and commitment to get something done. So some people are investing in education, some people are investing in rural livelihoods, some people are investing in gender. But what happens is it's a limited time period and limited amount of money. So when you're doing an impact evaluation or when you're doing a need assessment, if we can go beyond our own limited agendas and join hands with other corporates, either in a geographical setup or in a issue-based setup, and whether some kind of collective action can be worked out in both CSR spending, just to ensure that the scale and sustainability of the kind of work that has already been done is there or not. So I think I just want to get that to the table and hand it over back to you, Suhas.
Thank you very much, Shabnam. I think you've focused on the impact assessment, you focused on need assessment and collaborative approach, a collective action plan. I'm going to request Professor Anil Gupta. Sir, I think your opening remarks and your experience as a member of the high level committee that actually brought out some of these changes which are going to change the game for sure.
Thank you, Suhas. The spirit in the committee was that there should be more and more joyfulness, more and more freedom to the companies, more and more flexibility, so that they can uh, think of creative solutions. Many new categories, eligible categories were added. So at some stage, you might share with the participant that now the purview of CSR activities has been widened, and several activities which were earlier not included as eligible for the CSR are now eligible. Many need segments, many unmet need segments have been included. So that is one. But now let me move over from there to what I think could galvanize the CSR community to generate more optimistic, more impactful outcomes. Shabna mentioned very interestingly one out of the 4 cells of a matrix of high investment, low investment, high impact, low impact. So the cell that I am going to focus on is low investment, high impact, because that is the one where companies can focus and generate much higher impact than what the conventional method of spending would achieve. So what are these spends which can generate high impact? My first suggestion would be that India is the hotbed of frugal innovations, grassroots innovations. The whole world looks up to us for the ability to solve problems at low cost and with great efficiency. Also, that frugality is not only for consumer or the corporation, but also for the nature. So we believe culturally and otherwise, though we produce a lot of waste, but the culturally at least there's an essence that we should try to be frugal for nature. We should try to conserve nature. So how do we create spends which will have high impact not only for society but also for nature? And that to me will be one of the game changing. We saw during COVID-19 that during the lockdown period, within a month and so, nature has rebounded with enormous energy and vibrance. That shows that given the chance, nature can heal itself and heal all of us. So therefore, if that is the case, then we don't have any reason to live with dirty rivers and dirty slums and dirty places and all other waste that we produce and throw around and create burden on the soil. Imagine if Indians started living like US citizens. There is not enough space on this earth to put the waste around. So we need to be frugal in that regard. Now, what are the ways in which impact can be maximized with minimum investment? The first preference I will give is to knowledge public goods. So let's look at this way. The large number of CSR investments are in education, buildings, sports to some extent. But even today, when during COVID we had 75% children having no access to smartphone and therefore out of online education, we did not get a great initiative from anywhere. Please pardon me for saying this so bluntly, because children are the first, that we did not have a great initiative to bring them online through either giving them smartphones or changing the pedagogy. There were some teachers who made some great innovations of using conference call system, and one of whom we gave an award, Mr. Jadhav from Maharashtra, and few other things. But the large scale impact on inclusion of children who were excluded and are still excluded from online education did not take place. So we need to create, what is the alternative? Alternative is that if we create local language content comparable to the best in the market, And I don't have to name those companies, which are big leaders in online education and good quality content. Similar quality of content in Indian languages made available to every single school in 650,000 villages of India would achieve a great result. Now, different companies can take responsibility. And here I agree with Shabnam that we could converge, we could do collaborative work, that somebody can look after Telugu, somebody can look after Marathi, somebody can look after Kerala, and somebody can look after the creation of the good quality content and make it open source. Let there be no asymmetry between the children who go to private schools and children who go to government schools. The first asymmetry, the whole bedrock from which the leadership of our future country, our future destiny of our country will emerge, that playing field should be leveled. That is the first thing I would say. Similarly, innovation public good. How do we create innovation public good? Somebody has solved a problem. That solution cannot reach everywhere. So how do you do that? If it cannot reach there, somebody will have to acquire the right. We created one GTIF in NIF, Grassroots Technology Innovation Acquisition Fund. If it is intellectual property protected, pay a compensation to the intellectual property owner, acquire the right, make it open source. That's innovation public good. And India must take lead in creating innovation public goods. First for India, of course. Later on, we can make them globally, because once you make it open access, it can be used by anybody, anywhere. That's not a problem. So first was educational knowledge public goods. Second is innovation public good for various verticals. So let's say if somebody has a lot of waste, plastic waste, and if you have a technology to produce, let's say pyrolysis by creating more energy out of it, by creating tiles out of it, by creating construction material, by creating beds out of the PPEs and so on. So many different solutions are possible from the waste materials that are being used. Acquire those technologies if possible and make them open source, and then engage those innovators in building capacity of the users. So I'm not saying that once you acquire, they're out of business. No, they will have another business now. Now they will create capacity for the solution that they themselves developed, and they will be paid for it under CSR. So that is the third thing that I will mention. The fourth is that we should try to create mentoring platforms. There are a large number of small groups trying different things. Small groups trying to grow trees, somebody growing urban gardens, somebody is doing water cleaning of the lakes, somebody is doing something else. A lot of activities are taking place and they remain localized, and there is no cross-fertilization of the ideas. So I would say that companies should cooperate and create cross-fertilization platforms for innovation, innovative solutions. And that will mean that we create new benchmarks of efficiency, new benchmarks of accountability, both to nature and to the society. And surely this will help in improving the productivity in each vertical. The next point is about lending human resources. How do we lend people, not just money, but people to projects, to institutions, to platforms? And through this process, the companies will deliver or contribute the most precious resource. They can quantify it under the accounting rules, so that whatever the cost of the person is to the company can be contributed under the CSR. That I think will not pose any problem from accounting perspective. But the question is, that is a high quality investment. Giving money is easy. Contributing human beings, human resources is less easy. But the fact that these people are very difficult to be hired by the implementing organizations, their capacity goes up. I would anytime, Gyan and Srishti would anytime appreciate in the Honeybee Network, getting highly qualified people from the corporate sector coming and working with us to help grassroots innovators, because that brings a great deal of energy and blends the capabilities, the empathy, the samvedana that our team may have, and the efficiency that your team can bring together will enrich the experience. So many times when there's a burnout in the corporations, people doing the same thing over and over again, they can charge their batteries with us and discharge in the companies. Come and spend sabbatical for 1 week to 1 year or 2 years. It could be as short as 1 week also. So I would say that contributing human beings is very important. One of the points that we must also try to do is leadership development platform and fellowships. Fellowship for youth and fellowship for managers of the voluntary organizations, Section 8 companies, for incubators and other. We should try to build their capacity and provide fellowships for long-term incremental but continuous learning and continuous capacity building, and giving them exposure to the best institutions, best projects, best sites, so that their ability to deliver better improves. We should also think of how we can create the R&D in social development. See, it's all right to say that social development should take place. We need good quality research, rigorous research in action learning, action research, as well as conventional theoretical theory model building, which will show that market fails when the state fails, and sometimes even civil society fails. How do we create opportunities for unmet need to be met? So I would conclude by saying, and there's a comment here that yes, the environmental impact assessment and all other such consultations have been to some extent diluted. There is no doubt about it. We need to reinvigorate that, because India wants to be a model of high accountability to nature and higher accountability to society. In fact, only 2 days back, the Science and Technology Minister launched a biodiversity mission, biological resource-based development mission for Himalayan region. So there's a concern. The recent tragedies have brought to the focus that if we do not conserve the catchments of rivers and catchments of the various rivers and other ecosystems in the Himalayan region, surely, and other regions in the country, Western Ghat for that matter, or other regions of the country, then our society cannot survive for too long. So I completely agree that there is a need for greater capacity building, not just doing EIA, but building capacity for doing EIA is also important, because many small companies and medium-scale companies do not have that skill, and that skill needs to be created. And we need to create open source tools. So legacies should think about creating tools, just as you said, CSR Engine. We need similar tools for building capacity of the people, both AI-based and machine learning-based, so that these tools also become smarter over a period of time and help people. So let me conclude by saying that the journey of CSR investments from conventional, stereotypical to very creative and very innovative investments has begun. I greatly appreciate companies which have tried to make a big difference. I remember when recently Gyan created, during the Corona pandemic period, in 240, 50 villages, they created nutrition gardens. Now, obviously, when during such period teachers create these nutrition gardens, the children will grow with the green fingers, community will understand this. So there are new ways in which we should try to develop pedagogies of transformation of society and nature, and both have to go together. There is no way we can exclude one over another. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thanks for that insight. I think there's always a learning for all of us when you articulate these issues. One of the critical areas that you talked of is about, let's say, human resources being far more important for implementing any of these initiatives. And I think, sir, amongst us, we have a person, Mr. Govind Etiraj. Govind actually, chucked his very high-paying corporate career to join Aadhaar movement and join government. From there, he's now moved to creating a social enterprise virtually in his own space. And thank you very much, Govind, for joining us. There could be no better example than you about how critical the human resources are and how one individual can make an impact across ecosystems. I know for sure that your inputs actually are used by international philanthropic organizations to understand where should they be investing so that there is a maximum impact in India. So low investment, high impact is something which your data provides to all of us. Over to you, Govind, for your opening remarks and any special comments that you may have.
Thank you so much, Suhas. So let me, I'm a financial journalist principally. India Spend is a public interest journalism initiative. We use data to tell stories in areas like education, health, environment, and gender. The whole idea being to bring and improve the quality of public discourse. So hopefully, if we know more and use data or evidence to understand what's happening in health and education, health more so maybe today, then our policy response and our understanding will also be superior. And that's really the approach that we take. let me take a slightly, since, like I said, I qualified by saying I'm a financial journalist first, because I've spent more than 25 years almost doing that. So let me look at it a little differently, Suhas, with your permission. This law originally was created or passed in 2014, and it was based on and triggered by a certain presumption and assumption of the role of private sector. The role of private sector in India in itself, or the view of it, changes with time. So in the current dispensation, which may be a few months old only, we are viewing private sector as an important participant in the country's growth and economy. We feel that private sector should not be denigrated. Entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship should be rewarded and felicitated. And when I say all of this should be done, I mean from the point of view of government, who created the CSR law to start with. I think there are 2 or 3 points. I think one is that 9 years on, we need to revisit and relook at what this has achieved in its entirety. I think when we talk about the amendments, we are talking about amendments, for instance, let's say decriminalization. We've taken it to an extreme, and we are now trying to bring it back and really fighting to bring it back and bring about greater flexibility in the way funds can be used or unused funds can be utilized. But I think the fact still is that we are not trusting private sector entirely to manage its funds and his CSR funds. Secondly, we don't seem to be implicitly trusting market forces to do the same thing. If you look at now the stock prices of companies in the energy space, as you know, most of them are down. Most large portfolio investors have reduced their holding in energy companies, particularly fossil fuel energy companies. Why? Because they feel that this is not an area they should be supporting going forward, or they should not be using their investor money to support such initiatives going forward. So that's a market force. And which is why when you look at statements made by large energy companies, and I've been in conversations with many in groups like this, they first talk about renewable energy, they talk about their contribution towards society, towards the planet, and so on, and then talk about maybe what they're doing on fossil fuel. So there is very, very strong market force working there. There are also regulations working in some countries, and one is not discounting that, but not CSR contribution for sure. I think the third thing is that if you take an example, I'm going to highlight why the role of private sector is important and our attitude towards it, which is changing, is good. If you look at the COVID pandemic, in March, we started, responding to it. We had a lockdown in the 3rd week of March. Then the whole challenge was to test people. The first response was to use government agencies and the government machinery to test it, and that did not work. And only when we started involving private sector in testing, and we could expand the capacity of testing rapidly. And that gave us a better control of what was going on in terms of the pandemic spread and our policy response to it, or the epidemiological response to it. Similarly, today, if you look at vaccines, it's been a month now, I think, almost, that we've launched our vaccines, but we are not achieving distribution strength. Countries like the United Kingdom have vaccinated almost 30% of their adults for the first dose. We are, at something like under 1% and maybe 0.5%. Even if you want to vaccinate 600 million people in our country, the numbers just look impossible because of the way we are going. Funnily enough, as we all know, the vaccines are being produced by the private sector, which is 2 companies, and both are homegrown entrepreneurs. And all our global diplomacy, all the quick wins that we've had is because of these 2 enterprises and these entrepreneurs. So therefore, I think our dependence on private sector to deliver to solutions for this pandemic, I think, is much higher than maybe what we should acknowledge. So to come back, I think the CSR, the amendments that we've looked at are obviously good. The fact that there is no criminal prosecution is a relief, but I would always question, as a financial journalist, why was it there in the first place? Secondly, I think it's time for us to look at laws like this as transitionary. They came in 2014. They went to an extreme maybe in 2018-19, and by 2021 we are already amending. And maybe by 2025, which is a little after 10 years of the law, we should be actually thinking of phasing it out and trusting market forces to do the job. I'm not saying put all your bet on market forces. That's also not a good thing. But I think market forces with some element of regulation or light touch regulation will, in my mind, at least achieve much more, particularly with the kind of companies we're talking about. We're talking about large companies who have mostly presence in public markets or have goods and services which have high stakeholder exposure and therefore have no choice but to work in a far more integrated way with the environment and nature. So I'll pause here. I've taken a slightly different tack, Suhas, but I thought someone like me has the flexibility to do that, and I'll hand it back to you.
No, thank you very much, Govind. I think it is a perspective which I respect, and probably at some cornerstone agree there with you that yes, market forces will be important, and that the trust factor that you talked about in terms of corporates not being trusted to do things in a right manner or the way somebody would want to from the point of view of making difference. I think we've had extreme examples within corporate sector. And probably the light touch regulation that you talked about is trying to say that if there is a benchmark, if we have role models in front of us, will rest of the companies which are probably in the mid segment or even the smaller companies, we try to emulate uh, those large companies who are probably ideals. They're no longer ideals in corporate sector, but I think there is still somebody would look forward to some group or some company. Having said that, I'm just sorry that I think Ravi dropped off because there is a cloud burst that happened in Bangalore and he's lost the connectivity. I think that's the problem with being digitally connected. But we'll try and bring him back. But I'm gonna request Shabnam. Shabnam, you have been with Global Compact Network, which is really the corporate's initiative in making difference to the UN program, especially from the point of view of SDG. What has been your experience? Are the corporates really responsible, or what? Can we trust them way down the line? And as Govind says, allow the market forces to work around it. What has been your experience? Because it's very important for us to understand this element from the point of view of CSR obligations. If we consider this as a law, which is a compliance tick the box law, then I think way down the line, we will somewhere falter. People will try to find ways as to how do I tick the box and not really make the difference. But uh, is the Global Compact Network initiative in India today uh, something that we should look forward to from the point of view of saying yes, responsible uh, corporate citizens, responsible corporates interacting to achieve SDG goals? Because corporates understand this, that the biggest risk identified by them today is actually climate change, and that's a major focus on the SDG. Ravi, sorry, I think we'll come back to you after Shabnam.
I think, would you want to take Ravi, because in case he gets lost again, just catch hold of him.
Yeah,
am I
Ravi,
audible?
yes, you are, and good. Thanks. Good seeing you back again. I heard that there was a cloud burst, and I was kind of worried
I'm
about.
sitting in darkness, so fortunately managed to get one connection through. So. Yes, Suhas.
Yeah. So Ravi, you know, you have been trying to preach goodness to corporate sector. You've been trying to work uh, uh, with this spirit for a long time. You've had a long stint in corporate sector, then you moved to create SHRM, which actually tried to preach to the HR professionals how do you rise up above in ethical parameters, so to speak, broadly. Uh, and now you're trying to articulate uh, His Holiness's vision with respect to compassion and goodness across Indian corporate sectors. Where do you see in that journey the CSR amendments now and the entire CSR uh, regime that we've had since 2014. Probably regime is a bad word. But over to you.
Thank you, Suhas. Thank you, Suhas. In fact, hearing Professor and Govindarajan, they talked of collective action, and in some way, I think they also touched upon collective sensing, collective intelligence. Now, that to me is a big move forward in any initiative, even more so on something like CSR. But I want to pause here because these are all the approach up till now has been in a wicket route, as they say, as a small route through which he made change happen. When I look at the participants, the 400 plus participants today, I'm hugely encouraged. I'll tell you why. They are, in my opinion, and I'm saying they because I have stepped out of the industry domain, they are sitting in a place of tremendous opportunity to make significant change. Now, it is easy, it is convenient to put the onus of everything onto government or somewhere else. But for a moment, I want each one of us to pause and look at the Sukshma Roop, get down to the micro, which is ourselves, my own being. All of us as people have something very unique, which is in the animal kingdom is very, very unique. One, we have the power to put ourselves in other people's shoes. This is significant. So this you may call empathy, but it's a little more than that. Secondly, is the need of every human being to make things better for himself and everybody around. Most animals in the animal kingdom literally live for today. Yes, they will build a shell, they will have a residence, they may collect some nuts, but their vision does not include other life forms. Human beings are gifted in this special place where they can actually not just empathize, but work on constant improvement. The third thing, unique to everyone here, is we seek to be treated with fairness and compassion. Ask yourself, would you like to be treated fairly? No brainer, yes. Would you like to be treated with compassion? Again, no brainer, yes. So I want to take 30 seconds to, compassion is not kindness. Compassion is a trigger which makes us want to make things better for other people, other living things, other non-living things. Think of mountains, rivers, and most importantly for myself. If you look at compassion like this, then compassion is at the core a constant improvement program, right? So why do I say that the participants in this webinar are sitting in an opportunity? Because these people are in leadership positions in businesses, in companies today. Now, why do companies exist? At the core of sustainability is the philosophy that companies exist to serve society. It's very easy to take a myopic way to think that society exists for companies to go there and exploit what is there. But thanks to technology, thanks to increased awareness, think of our children, think of the youngsters of today who are bothered by firecrackers not being used, to whom treating handicapped people with respect it's second nature. And they will think twice before throwing garbage on the roads as compared to, I want to dare say, people of my generation. These people in companies which are existing to make themselves sustainable are understanding the fact that companies and businesses exist to serve society. Now, think of our participants. Put this whole thing together at the smallest level. there is this need for constant improvement, and they are sitting in corporations which are there to serve society. This whole thing is an awareness of goodness in each one of us, which can actually transform everything that happens. So when we talk of CSR particularly, let me give you a simple example. I was party to a discussion early during COVID times where it was a large company manufacturing hand wash and face wash. Clearly, they did see an opportunity to get into the hand sanitizer because everyone is saying, clean your hands, wash your hands. The discussions over a few days centered around, should we move? A clear answer, yes, we should move to production of sanitizer. How much should we do? They say, stop everything else and go on to sanitizer. And then the $1 million question, literally the $1 million question. What should we price our product? Very proud to say that, proud because it happened when I was around, the company decided to drop the prices of their own hand sanitizer and produce it in outstanding amount of volumes. I'm hesitating to even name the company because they are confidentiality. They do not want to come out into the public. This basic goodness that is there in the corporation of today is my big hope. Professor Sinha mentioned, the spirit of the discussions was held, it should be joyous. I think it is in a very fortunate and joyous place where people can themselves discover newer ways. The schedule lists out a few things where you can, but all you need to do is to have a knowledge portal, share experiences, best practices, next practices. That collective sense can be a bedrock for significant change. You may dream of wanting to be like the United States or European countries, but if you see this as an opportunity, then you will find ways to spend this money in ways that it will make a difference to other people. I'm saying other people, other living things, plants and animals, and other non-living things, think mountains and rivers. That goodness is something that I have experienced in corporates, not just the larger ones. The small businessman is still caught up in his 8-hour schedules of trying to make two ends meet. But in his dream is the fact that he should take care of the neighborhood around him. I think it's more than a joyful place. We are in a hopeful place, a place full of hope. And these amendments are possibly setting a direction that these are just minimum standards that the government is giving in terms of a direction, go like this. I believe there have been companies and there will be more and more companies which will try and find out innovative ways to actually not just limit themselves to the 2% that is mandated, but go beyond and not just restrict themselves to the schedule items, but to actually get into other areas. Classic example, I want to come back to that collective sense and collective action. I, again, party to a simple experiment of lake restoration. I shared it with some of you yesterday. Lake restoration requires immense resources. Now, how does one company did come forward to help out, but can they sustain it year after year? Number one question. So they put in the money, and if others don't come together, chances are that first year's expense that one company did go down the drain, literally down the drain. But if other companies came up and started working collaboratively, that collaboration for goodness is not just joyous, it's very, very hopeful. I believe these amendments are setting the direction to take us to a beautiful place.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Ravi. I think that's the kind of appealing to the conscience of 250 people on this call today. Thank you very much for that. Shabnam, coming back to you, can we really trust the corporates to do this as your experiences?
Well, it is a catch-22 kind of a question. I think I personally believe, as Govindraj mentioned earlier, market forces have a huge role to play. And the discussion around market forces, I would also expand to the kind of not only the financial expectations, but also the socio-environmental expectations that are rising up. So what is a niche factor to be counted? India has a lot of family-owned businesses, and we have to realize that the structure, the operation, the vision and values that family-owned businesses operate in is quite different from, say, the public sector undertaking that are working in the country, and to the multinationals that are existing. So even within this three big domains, the expectations, the accountability is variable. And with that kind of variable accountability, many a times, like as we all know in teams also, different people respond to different kind of challenges or different accountability structures. For some people, as Ravindran said, doing good, being good, karma, and the next generation and societal good makes a difference. With or without law, they will comply and they will go beyond their means to be of value. For some people, irrespective of the fact that you have the best of most regulated market, most regulated framework, they will still find loopholes to cross, and they will have assistance from various kind of professionals to get away with a lot of criminal activities. I think with these kind of CSR amendments and laws and the sustainable development goal framework, what we're trying to cater to is the middle audience. And the middle audience, I think the groups that are in the middle, to my experience, is the largest crowd, that who wants to do good but might not know how, what, where, and what kind of competition, where to showcase their work. So I think that is the kind of group that we are focusing on. And to some extent, I myself, so in my head, so I'm an anti-corruption person, I'm a compliance person. I think it's only compliance that will predominantly, not only, but predominantly compliance that will make people toe the line. Because unless there are a set of rules and regulations, people do tend to make their own interpretations. But having said that, again, how do you come together in a framework? How do you represent as a group? Those kind of things become important. I would also be very happy, say, going forward in the next couple of years, because I think moving beyond CSR discussion, the corporate social responsibility, to taking over the sustainability agenda is much more important. Because when we're talking about the sustainability agenda, the people, planet, profit discussion, we're taking it to a different level. From being responsible to being accountable, I think is the journey that I personally see is the difference, the journey between CSR and sustainability. So CSR, you don't need a kind of just a benchmark of how much to spend, but how do you spend more and harm less. So, for example, within the Global Compact, we are working on a waste management project, or something to do with ending plastic waste. So there can be avenues, there can be ways of how you reduce plastic, how do you manage your waste. But at the same time, companies need to be mandated to declare their plastic footprint, and how are they themselves using it less. So it's not only about managing your waste after it's created, but at the offset, what are you doing? So like CSR will take care of managing the waste after it has come out into the society, but sustainability will take care of how much waste is being created within the businesses. And I think that is where, as the Global Compact, as businesses who are members and who are partners with the Global Compact, that is where we are facilitating the discussion.
Thank you very much, Shabnam. You sidetracked me. You sidetracked my question. Thanks for that. I wouldn't push you to answer that. Having said that, you see, therefore, Professor Saab, I'm going to come back to you on this two things which bother actually. One is, if you consider this CSR as law and a statutory obligation, people will find ways around it to say that I'm complying with the letter of the law, forgetting that the spirit behind it, by its own nature, contemplates a voluntary action. When you're talking about a social responsibility from a corporate point of view, in its nature is implicit that it ought to be a voluntary action. And as you rightly said, it ought to be an action of joy there for the corporate to say that I'm doing this because I believe in it, not because law is telling me to do that. We have seen this umpteen number of times. The second element that I want to kind of touch upon, or I would request you to touch upon, is, you see, we've made it very difficult for foreign funds to come into the NGO sector today. We've made it very difficult. Is this an alternative that the CSR funds coming from here will actually find its way? Although, as you rightly said yesterday, I think although this law has been there for past 8 years, I think hardly any funds have flown to the grassroots in terms of its well-being or innovations. So there are two kind of things that I'm still confused. If you say it's law and our obligation, I'll do the tick the box. I'll find the ways in which I'm compliant, whether it is reporting in my financial statements or not. So that joy of doing it is probably being pushed to say that it's a legal obligation then.
I'm going to say something. I'm going to say something which will not be of liking to many, but I will say that.
Sure,
As a
sir.
professor, when I teach in a class, why do I give grades? It should be joyful learning. The students should learn because it is in their interest, and they will grow as a better professional if they learn better, isn't it? Isn't it obvious? Why do we have grades then? And why do we have differential grades then? Why don't I give the same grade to everybody? So, even in the acts where the self-interest is so obvious, the whole life depends upon what you learn in the class. At least I would like to believe that, whether it's true or not.
Sure.
Still, we are supposed to regulate. Look at the conditions of our rivers and on the ocean around us. The effluent are not supposed to be released without treatment, correct? And we don't have a machinery, and we will never have a machinery which will check every single plant and see whether or not they are treating. You know that we install the plants, we install the pollution control devices, and we don't run them. Now, as an accountant, you will agree it's very simple to check. Look at the expenditure on the chemicals that are used for pollution control in your balance sheet and match it with the amount of production that you have had. And you can check it whether or not people are buying enough of the chemicals which are required for treatment, isn't it? We don't do that. Auditors don't do that when they audit the accounts. They don't show this contradiction between the not adequate expenditure on the treatment of effluents versus. So that means we are not fulfilling our responsibility to nature, which is, as a responsible corporate citizen, we should do that, isn't it? I mean, this is well known. It is not just in India, around the world, but in India, we have a very precarious situation because we do know the effect of air pollution, for example, and water pollution on the health of the country. It's well known, well documented. So I would say that, yes, it is true. We are moving towards a direction when the self-interest and the interest of society will converge. And that is the most enlightened state of human consciousness. And I wish all of us move in that direction. No question about it. But the fact is, you have a traffic policeman checking your mask, whether or not you're wearing your mask. Mask is in our interest. It is in our interest to save us from the COVID-19 infection. Why do we have to put first 200 rupees fine, then 400 rupees fine, then 1,000 rupees fine in Ahmedabad? Why did we increase the fine? Ask us, please, let us look at it from the pure, simple human behavior point of view. My life, I'm getting infected. Of course, I may infect others, but I'm also getting infected. And yet I'm not using the mask. And therefore, state has to coerce me. So please appreciate, in public administration, we talk about a theorem which says optimal coercion is not zero. In home, in families, parents have to discipline the children sometime, not because they don't love them, because they realize that sometime in our own volition, with the self-volition, we sometimes don't see our interest in the short run as well as we ought to see it. So I'm not in favor of coercion. I'm not in favor of punishment. In fact, we have removed many of those clauses which were difficult. Now we tried to make it self-regulatory system. Committee was very keen about that. But at the same time, we are not yet probably mature enough as a society, as a democracy, as an institutional structure, that we can leave everything to this self-regulation. We are not there. You know how many people pay taxes? Just 6 crore. In a country of 120 crore people, only 6 crore people pay taxes. Isn't that an indication that we are not regulating our conduct properly? So therefore, there is a problem in our society, and CSR is a positive action, is a constructive action, is an action where impact, I'm again repeating, there can be huge impact with small monies. In fact, CSR funds should be used to create pilot projects. I mean, I was very happy when lake example was given. Now, you can't clean all the lakes by collective action also alone, but you need collective action. Now, somebody will need to bring dredgers, somebody will need to bring devices which our innovator has developed in Andhra Pradesh for removing the aquatic weeds. Somebody will have to take technology from ISC. We gave an award, Jati Award, Ghanaian Young Technological Innovation Award, to that student who developed using aquatic weed to develop gases, natural gas for, as a fuel and all that, run pumps and engines. So I'm saying that there are a lot of innovations which will have to be incorporated, not just in cleaning the lake, for example, for using the biomass which comes out of the cleaning for better use. We need a lot of innovation. So the CSR should be just like once upon a time we said, public sector should be a model employer. Now today we should say private sector-led CSR will be the model developer of various sectors. They will create models of how schools can be run, how primary health center can be made better, how the COVID-19 vaccine can be distributed. You saw the article by Devi Shetty today morning. Right. And what is the point he makes? The last sentence that Devi Shetty uses is, the countries which are poor in wealth need not be poor in health. And he said just 400 rupees vaccine by private sector hospitals will solve the problem, and government cannot do that. And this point came up today. I think Govind Raj or Professor Ramdan, one of you mentioned this point today in the discussion. So what are we saying? We want our private sector involvement in a big way, no question about it. There should be no hesitation in saying that. And I'm happy that today government is trying to recognize their role more positively than it was in the case in the past. But we should also accept that the contributions by the private sector, CSR, if you look at just the accounts, just the numbers, the number of public sector units contributing to CSR versus the private sector contributing to CSR is not something to feel very proud of. I'm talking about hard numbers, no emotions here, hard numbers. Why is it so? It is so because we have not yet seen our role as seriously as we should. And if that is the case, maybe after a few years we can do away with it. I agree. The voluntary compliance can be useful. At one time, the people did not use helmets at all. Now there are more people using helmets. So after coercion and so on, time comes when a critical mass is reached. But till that time is reached, I would say that we should all try to work out maybe watchdog functions. Maybe Global Impact should be also performing a watchdog function and give a report to the country, state of CSR report for the country, and tell us what is the compliance from the corporate sector and what is holding that back. And maybe we will have to motivate them. Maybe we will have to build their capacity also. It is not that everybody who doesn't contribute CSR doesn't want to contribute CSR. I will make a distinction here. We should not assume that those who are not contributing to CSR do not want to contribute. Sometimes they don't have a skill and use human resources, maybe somebody to explain to them how they can contribute better. So we need to build their capacity also. Corporates are very good in doing what they're doing in that as a business. They may not be very good in this case, isn't it? So I think there's a case for little moral pressure, little coercion, till we learn to be responsible. And I think this is a case in every vertical, not just CSR.
No, thank you very much, Govind. I think that kind of sets the tone back to you in terms of saying that, yes, do we look at this as kind of a transitionary mechanism, a transitionary legislation, if I were to put it that way, so that there is a little bit of coercion, there is a little bit of moral pressure, that we transition into a situation whereby the market forces can then take over.
Yeah, so I think let me borrow from Shabnam. I think she drew a very fine, a very sharp distinction between accountability and responsibility. I mean, today we're having this discussion in the context of accountability. I think the same 400 people, if we all came back and said that how do we do the same discussion in the context of responsibility, which means that I want to be responsible, I want to be seen as doing, I want to do good and be seen as doing good because it's good for my brand, it's good for my stakeholders, it's good for my relationship with the government, and so on and so forth. And therefore, how do I be more responsible? I think, and that is something that many companies are already doing, even if whether you ask them or not, they've been doing, are doing, and have been doing for a long time. And I think that is what we should conceptually move towards. Now, I think on the question of, when you create a law, and there are many laws, Suhas, I'm no one to, give you any fresh insight on this. When you create a law, you create a structure, you create a monitoring mechanism. There are people, there are bureaucracies. I mean, I'm not saying it in a bad way necessarily, but the administration and the monitoring and the oversight within companies, in government, and tomorrow you want to go and catch someone because they didn't do it, and then you penalize them, and then you create impact assessment experts, and they become a new kind of so you're doing all of this to achieve what is really what I am saying that you should be asking. Now, we could be asking this question in 2025, but all I'm saying is if you start asking that question today, maybe we will have a better situation in 2025. I think if you look at now the fiscal, we've just had the union budget. The government wants to raise a lot of money. And rightfully so, because we're just emerging from the throes of a pandemic. The government needs revenue. It should tax more. I mean, I'm not saying it should, after all, the government did reduce taxes when no one actually expected it to reduce it, corporate taxes. So nor am I saying please increase taxes, because people will kill me. But maybe there are other ways to, take some of that money from companies who are doing well. In any case, we're talking about a set or a subset of companies, and use that for things maybe which the government can directly administer, which maybe in the area of climate, maybe in the area of environment broadly, maybe in the area of rural upliftment, maybe for Narega kind of schemes. So, I'm taking a very theoretical construct. I admit this is not I'm not giving a policy prescription, which is, whatever, but I'm saying in general, let the government take more money if it wants to, which it is in any case. Moreover, it needs more money, particularly in the next couple of years. Even before COVID, things were not really good. I mean, the economy was slowing down. So let's take money differently, but let companies manage or run their accounts independent of this problem or this headache, if I were to call it that. I think they have a lot of other compliance headaches to manage, as they should, both, particularly for large companies. Those are both domestic as well as global. And companies who are in areas like energy, they have to think about even more issues. They have to think about pollution. They have to think about effluents, and as they should, and haul them up and throw them into jail if someone is, putting effluent into the system, as many people were in Gujarat once upon a time, right? But on CSR, which is essentially a product of a certain thinking not very long ago, I feel we should, the time has come to start thinking about transition, and then if eventually transition.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I think the discussions is kind of peaking to a very interesting level. However, I have to be conscious of the time. But I'm going to kind of quickly do a round of, I'm sorry, but closing remarks. I probably will follow this up later on with another kind of related webinar. But Ravi, how part of it, and in your closing remarks, if you can touch on how part of it, because I think one is, of course, if there is a legislation here, there is an amendment, there is a game changer here, which I personally believe it's a game changer. However, I think there is this huge issue about can we really force companies to do something which, if they don't want to do, they will not do. But how to make them believe that this is not a statutory obligation per se, a compulsory compliance, but it's compliance by your choice. As everybody is kind of in agreement with one proposition, that if the companies demonstrate that by their choice they're doing these things, I think not only that their enterprise value goes up, their competitive spirit goes up, their sustainability goes up in the long run. And I think, therefore, how do you make sure that we move them onto a different paradigm?
uh, you are either deliberately picking on me, or because I do believe that this compliance, look at this webinar, the way we are holding it. There is a guideline. There are a set of rules that we follow. There is a norm. Call it law, call it guideline, call it a code. Everything in life for time immemorial is set within boundaries. I'm not going to plug for the quality of the decisions that are coming in these amendments, but I'm saying in principle, this is a track that has been laid out with a specific direction. And companies can continue to crib and say, your books of accounts are governed by laws. The way you manufacture are governed by laws. Your customer service is governed by laws. Everything is governed by laws. Doing good, why should it stay back? And if you're telling me that you want to do good, then what's your problem? Do it and channelize it on the track that the government is suggesting. Do it. And again, Professor Gupta will possibly know a lot more of this. To me, these amendments are a movement in the right direction. They have brought in flexibility. They are encouraging, and there seems to be a receptivity. If there are newer ways to do these, make these more palatable if you want, I think the government is willing to look at it. I don't hold a candle for the government, but I think this issue of whether it should be mandated or not is a distraction. It needs to be avoided. Everything is governed. There is a code, call it a code, which you follow. We have a code of conduct. We wear clothes. We speak to each other respectfully. Where is that coming from? There's no law that says it. Professor mentioned last time that we are one of those few countries which have actually put a law around this. So necessarily, there will be, we're trying to mutate into something, jumpstart and get into the future. There is no better way to do it than with a prescription, with a set of guidelines. And I think it's reasonable to say that, understand it, if you have to open up, we have to change our mindset. That this is not a ruler saying, teacher saying that you don't know your 5+5 table and rapping your knuckles. No, this is much more than that. Each company is there to serve society is the cardinal principle of sustainability. If there is a mechanism to administer it, I think we should administer it authentically, like we would like our children to do. We don't want our children to tell lies. We don't want them to misbehave. And when it comes to corporate life, we want to do things only on that one P of the triple bottom line. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that. Why are you picking on me? I do believe that, and I'm more unstructured than most people in life. I do believe that certain structures are required, and this structure has the flexibility to take us into the future much quicker and much better.
Sure. Thanks, Ravi. Shabnam, your closing comments, especially, can we expect to fulfill our obligations on SDG by 2030?
Some of it definitely, and the rest we'll leave it for the next 15 years of direction that will come from the United Nations. So I think incremental progress we are doing, we should keep doing. As long as we are moving forward and not backward, I think I'm fine with that.
Any closing comments on the topic of CSR?
I think just going back to the same thing, that CSR doing good. I think if we move beyond just looking at it as, again, as Ravi was saying, as mandatory, but how impact assessment can assist us in planning better and getting more visibility, because there has to be a business case for everything. That's one thing I've learned with the corporates. Even if you're working on anti-corruption, there has to be a business case for anti-corruption. So the business case for impact assessment is very important. And once we realize that all these are facilitating our inputs, our involvement with communities, with societies, and with scaling up our business and making it more sustainable, we'll definitely go in the right direction. So I think the purpose has to be ascertained, because just direction will not be enough if the purpose is lost. So with purpose, the right direction, and then progress is for sure.
Thank you very much. Govind, notwithstanding transitionary provision, notwithstanding market forces, we will have to live with the law. As lawyers, we always say, even if we don't like a particular law, we will have to live with it, whether it is a ruling from the Supreme Court or an enactment that comes out of from the Parliament. And I personally believe this is going to stay at least for a while. It's not going to be 2030. It will be beyond that. And as you rightly said, there is a wherewithal that has been put behind it. It's very difficult to dismantle it. But having realized this situation from one of the biggest challenges is actually data points when we talk about GRI SDG. And I think, how do we make that far simpler? Because I'll tell you my experiences with this. This came in 2009 as a form of a national voluntary guidelines. That was the first seed on the CSR. And we have seen even now when business responsibility reports of the companies come in, you see, there is a difference between what a statutory report on water consumption is and what a statement on business responsibility is in the same annual report. And as a part of technical advisory team to NFRA, we are now looking a lot of qualitative financial statements related issues, and this is one. Data is going to be a bigger challenge. Your views, and with that, some closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you once again, Suhas, and for inviting me on this group. If I look at, the totality of the amendments, they're all in the right direction because they obviously are making life simpler. They're responding to what companies and organizations have been saying that are their pain points. Equally, I think there is somewhere maybe the philosophical issue of a company saying that if I've earned the profit, I want to spend it my way, including, let's say, working with a private trust, right? And now we're saying that you cannot work with a private trust, and you have to work externally. So that's fine. But I think somewhere maybe one lesson for me is that how do you create an environment where a company really does good, right? Because I think there are too many dodges for those who want to create dodges. So in that sense, maybe regulation or law will never work to its full effect, as we've seen in many other areas. So how do we create a sense of true purpose? To pick from I think Shabnam and our professor, both the professors, and if we can, and if the government, right, because the government is driving it, if you can convey and instill a sense of true purpose, and then have regulation to back it, because you're saying, okay, you have true purpose, but here is the business you're in, and you need to show that how you're giving back to community, or how you're balancing maybe the damage that you're doing in some ways in the ecosystem or the ecology. Then maybe that's a way forward. But I think all this, whether this feedback or we should the government should constantly take feedback. The government should constantly look at the role of private sector in a very broad sense. And like I said, I think it's some of the recent statements that have been made by the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister are very welcome about the recognition of private sector, entrepreneurs, entrepreneurship, and so on. And in that context, I feel that we should liberalize these guidelines further, with putting more onus on corporations to do good and to develop a true sense of purpose. Thank you so much, Suhas.
Professor Sir.
Just a small point. I think the spirit of what I have heard today is that, yes, companies should spend on CSR. No, there is no divergence of views on that. There is also a view that if we have flexibility in spending this money, better outcome will follow. I think that also we should accept, that the more flexibility we give to the companies to spend their CSR obligation, better outcomes will follow, because they are efficient implementer of projects and programs, by and large, not all, but by and large. Third thing is that there are 4 pillars on which sustainability rests, the natural capital, the social capital, the ethical capital, and the intellectual capital. The 3 capitals, natural is a provider of all resources, and social capital has third-party sanction, trust, reciprocity, and third-party sanction. It is the ethical capital where internal commands and not external demands guide our behavior. Internal commands and not external demands guide our behavior. That is why the difference between organizational behavior and institutional behavior. I think it is the crux of the matter is that the ethical capital has to be raised at all levels, not just in corporations, also in political system, also in social system, also in educational system. All of us have to become more responsible and more self-regulatory. I mean, how can anybody question their need for self-regulation to be maximized and the obligation for external regulation to be reduced? But the problem is that in the period that we are in at the moment, we need to move step by step. I would say regulations which are there, if they can give more flexibility to the companies to spend the money and give more leeway to them to spend the money and report the outcomes better, I think we might move a step forward. So from this meeting, I'm taking one suggestion that I think we should refer to the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, that we should identify those particular constraining features of the law where companies feel constrained in using their creativity and innovative potential to improve the social outcomes. I'm not aware of them precisely, but if they are there, we should identify them and try to relax them. I will be very happy to help in that process. But the fact remains, very small percentage contribute CSR. I've put down those on the chat for everybody to note that fact. 2% companies contributed 53% of the CSR. What are we talking about? In 2019, hardly 8,000 crores. I mean, what are we talking about? I guess against 50,000 crore was the obligatory expenditure expected. 50,000, 8,000, 1/6. So therefore, please appreciate that we are not there at that. If we are not there even in the compliance. Now tell me, what is the mechanism, Govind, Ravindran, all of you think about, by which we can change this ratio of compliance? How do we make sure that more companies come forward? 5,700 companies did not make any investment in CSR in 1819. 5,700 companies did not spend anything. So naturally, there's a lot that we need to do. There's a lot that we need to do. And many laws, for example, construction sector, for the low income group housing, laws came, high FSI came, a lot of things came. So I think if companies come out with specific incentives which will make their CSR obligations easier and more fulfilling, I think we should by all means incorporate them. But let us accept that even as a good corporate citizen, we need to be part of a society. After pandemic, the jobs have been lost. After pandemic, the hunger has increased. After pandemic, the income divergence has increased. After pandemic, children have gone out of the school. So there is a crisis at this moment. At this moment, I think we all need to come together and not just 2%, maybe more if we can do, contribute to the societal regeneration and rejuvenation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. I think nobody wants this dialogue to end, but I'm conscious of the time. We've almost had 1.5 hours of deliberation going on. Sir, we have a challenge on time, and that's where I'm kind of struggling now. There are lots of questions that have come up. How do you want to do that? One way is actually, I think I'm going to request Mehak. Mehak, if I think Mr. Sharad Abhyankar, one of the leading lawyers in India, has raised his hand. Will you request Sharad to speak? Hey, good to see you, sir.
Hi, Suhas. I have been, here patiently listening, learning quite a lot. I have been party to a lot of CSR initiatives, but I think the overall perception, I think Professor Gupta said it all, that if we are really seeing 5,700 companies not spending, it's also necessary for us to really go behind that cause. And some of the very specific recommendations that the committee made, specifically on the taxation issues, I think that is something which the government should have definitely picked up. the recommendation that one of the observations on the committee reports was that companies are choosing deliberately choosing items which have a availability of a tax break. So one of the very foundational recommendation was that please make all the sectors in Schedule 7 tax neutral. Please make that this expenditure tax deductible. I think some of those very simple demands could have been met, and these are not new. Surely these have been there since 2015. The first high-level committee report itself did mention about it. I think the CA Institute did a fantastic job in saying that why are we not able to account for the resources that company itself puts behind these activities. So there are lots of things which if we had seen that as part of the amendments, probably the attitude of the many companies to look at it really as a more positive step, it would have been better. I would have actually expected a lot many recommendations to come into the amendment, but I'm sure we are moving in the right direction. Thank you so much, Suhas.
Thanks a lot, Sharad. I think we'll look at this issue in terms of tax breaks. Uh, One of my clients fundamentally says, I don't want to donate because tax breaks are available. I'm not doing this for the sake of tax exemptions, but there are very few who will say that. I completely agree with you. That would go a long way in pivoting probably most of those who are today not reporting or not um, undertaking CSR activities. They would probably be nudged to do that. But thank you. Thanks a lot, Sharad. Sir, we're running, I'm conscious of the fact that we're running out of time bad. And I think Shabnam had to leave. And so what I'm going to request is that we will compile all these questions and circulate around to all the panelists. We will also provide answers to individuals and put it up on CSR Angel of Legacies. I think please come back to us. I'm extremely sorry that I'll have to log off because of paucity of time and not for anything else. But we will follow this up. And thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Professor Gupta ji. Thank you, Ravi.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Govind.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shabnam. Thanks, Sharad. I'm grateful to the entire Legacies team that supported us in putting this together. Mehak, Risha, Shashank, Jaideep, all of them. Thank you very much. Thanks a
Equally.
lot. Have a great weekend, great Friday evening, or
Bye-bye.
whatever is left of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Govind.
thank you,
Thank you,
Suhas.
Ravindran. Thank you, Shabnam. Thank